Tampa Home Talk, and we are back for hour number 2. And in the first part of the hour, we're going to have Kevin Overstreet talking about 10 common title problems. And then in the second hour, maybe a little bit of both, we're going to mix it up with Mr. George Root III, right, with Stockholm Law Group, and fascinating conversation we're going to have with you right here on Tampa Home Talk. So you got to stick around to figure out what that's going to be like. So, and you guys will certainly be able to bounce some stuff off of each other, I know. But Kevin, you've been on the show, no stranger to Tampa Home Talk. I think the last time you were here, I wasn't. So
that's right. So I guess this is our first time.
This is the first time here. Well, have you been on the air with me, haven't you? Or no?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, welcome back to Tampa Home Talk.
Thank you.
So, talk a little bit about what you do, because you guys do not only the title insurance part of it, but you also deal a lot with the title fraud part of it.
Yes. Let me first talk a little bit about what you do. I just wanted to give a shout out to you and your team. Really, my closers at my title companies. They're the very best judges of who's fun to work with and who's not. And you know how it is. We all have clients that we love. We have clients that we tolerate, and we have clients that we kind of wish our competitors had. And you're certainly one that we love. So we really appreciate everything so far. And you guys, you seem to run a tight ship here. So that's great. So good for you.
We do. We run a tight but fun ship.
Okay,
that
so
works, right?
Enough about you. So,
and just like that, we're on.
Yeah. So. My name's Kevin Overstreet. I'm the owner of several real estate related companies in the Tampa Bay area. I don't sell real estate, but the primary company is Insured Title Agency, and I just celebrated, not that it's a celebration, but my 23rd year
wow.
in that business. And I know I look awful young for that, but I started at a young age, and I'm not all that young now. So, but
yeah, I can relate to that one, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I started my career in St. Louis in the Midwest with a large, prominent title company there, and ended up helping them develop their national company. And then I went out on my own in 2003 in St. Louis and moved here to Tampa in 2005. And we did the math a few months ago to get an idea of how many transactions I've either closed or overseen the closing of, and it's a little north of 40,000. So we've done a few closings, and we've seen a few crazy things happen. So
let's talk about some of the 10 common title problems. So one of the first ones is errors in public records. So what kind of errors are you seeing in public records, and what's an easy way to get this stuff resolved?
Well, for the second question, easy way to get it resolved is to work with the title company and have them and get them employed as quickly as possible. So the one of the most, probably the most common thing that we see are mistakes on deeds prior to your seller taking title. And Florida has a strange, the legislation is strange in Florida in that in my opinion, there's no group of people better to correctly prepare a deed, whether it's a warranty deed, a quitclaim deed, any type of conveyance deed for real estate than a title agency.
I would second that for sure.
Well,
no offense to the attorneys, but really the ones that I see mess it up, George, are the ones that are not real estate attorneys.
Correct.
Because they don't know all the ins and the outs of real estate, and that's where I think, like, especially with attorneys, you definitely want a specialty, right? Like if I were to hire an attorney for real estate, it would not be a general attorney, it would be specifically a real estate attorney.
Yes, there are some brilliant attorneys who own title companies, the attorney-owned title companies, and some of those are great. I'm not an attorney. I'm an independent title agent and plan to always be that way. But getting back to the deeds, it's funny. So we're only, as a title agency, we're only allowed to, make sure I say this right, to prepare a conveyance deed if it is incident to the issuance of a title policy, which the obvious one is a deed from seller to buyer, and then we're going to issue a title policy to the buyer and the buyer's lender. So those are literally always done right when we see title company prepared deeds in the records. And then any attorney can prepare a deed. So what that means is right after that buyer takes title to the property, if they want to add a spouse or put the property into a trust or something like that, we're simply not allowed to do that. And in my opinion, that's the might of the Florida Bar Association in Tallahassee saying we want to make money on deeds because they charge a lot more than we do.
Well, I think it's a good idea too, because when you start changing deeds, there's a lot of stuff that comes with that, right? Like, I can tell you a lot of real estate attorneys have never even read a full mortgage contract. In there, there's a due on sale clause.
Yep.
There's a lot of other information in there that can, hinder what happens next, from homestead to due on sale clauses to a bunch of other things.
Yeah, and the I guess unfortunate thing is literally any attorney can prepare a deed. So like you were alluding to, there are attorneys that understand title extremely well, and they're going to do it right. And then there's the DUI defense attorney.
Yeah.
He can prepare a deed. He can also issue title insurance. And then amazingly, the other group of people in the state of Florida that can prepare a deed is everyone.
Yeah.
So any individual.
Those are the ones we see the most clouds on title, right? Where people prepare their own deed.
They're the ones
Wait, you can prepare your own deed?
Yep. Quit
Why?
They just
I can barely read the survey description where it says legal description. I'm like, no, can't read that.
And that is exactly what is done wrong. Most of when something's wrong,
No,
it's
of course.
typically the legal description. About 80% of title claims arise from a legal description error, and it can be because it's abbreviated, or sometimes it's quite innocent, where you're taking a deed from the past and you're copying that legal description onto your new title commitment, which also goes on to the new deed and the policy and everything. And it may say Lot B, and that B looks just like an 8. So then you say Lot 8. Well, there's no Lot 8 in the subdivision, and that lender can't foreclose.
Do you remember when they used to physically type the title policies and the legals? I remember that.
Yeah, we still do.
You do? You type it?
They're just not very long. Everything's about 20% of the HOAs in the nation are in Florida, so everything's a lot and block legal description. Where I'm from in Missouri, we would have
the meets and bounds, long, super duper long legal.
Links of chains, and it goes to the iron pin next to the old oak tree, and then 5 links of chains that way, and degrees, minutes, and seconds, and 2-3 pages long. Challenging to not make an error in that.
And then what happens is somebody comes in, they chop up part of that property, and now your whole legal description changes.
Yeah. And
what happens when the oak tree dies?
I don't know. I guess the steel pin is still there. So.
Okay, it's true.
Yeah, but yeah. So that's the most common error that we see is with deeds. But really, instead of getting into the top 10, what I'd like to do is eliminate most of those just by.
Well, number 2 was unknown liens. I want to know about that one. What, unknown liens?
Oh, we had one of. I can give a story here. So
yes, let me hear your unknown lien story.
So basically, if you do a home inspection, the buyer does a home inspection but chooses not to pay for the inspection because they fall out of the deal, we will put a lien on the home because we know that when it comes time for closing, that someone should discover the lien.
Well, it's technically a mechanic's lien.
Yeah,
right?
Someone should discover it and make it whole. But sometimes title companies don't do their jobs properly, and it's discovered after it closes by someone else, because I guess mortgage companies pull some kind of search too, and that's when we'll get paid.
Yeah,
so that's a long time later. Is that what you're saying?
It's within a year, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be right away, or it can take a long time, or it may never be discovered. Who knows? But some of that problem comes from the fact that the counties are always a little bit behind. So the deeds that we record, we have several closings today. So the ones that record today won't be viewable in the county records for a few days, sometimes a few months.
You're e-recording, though, everything now, right?
We are, but they're still not
delay on their end.
They're not official until, what is this, Friday, so probably something like Wednesday, which is very, very fast.
You're saying that's when they show up online, or what?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's called the gap, and that's a kind of a no man's land where we can do, right before closing, we do an update, and every title company should, to find things like what you just mentioned. But also some folks don't.
So is that gap covered in title insurance?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. The gap that the county creates is covered in title insurance. If an agency, such as my company, which we don't do this, but one like my company, would, if they just didn't do an update and they created an extended gap by not updating to the county records, then this portion is not covered. And that can get very messy, because then you may have an intervening lien where that title agency is on the hook for it. The title underwriter will deny the claim. Some title agencies don't have any money. So you may have a situation where you are going after
Their E&O?
Blood from a turnip.
Or E&O? Don't they have E&O insurance? They have to have that.
They do.
And they have underwriters, right, that are backing them?
And their job is to deny claims, too. That's the thing about insurance companies.
Yeah.
Two main jobs, collect premiums and deny claims.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Pat George is giving you a signal to hush your mouth because we're coming up on a break. Let's talk about whatever you want, Kevin. We'll get back after the break because clearly this outline is like this right now. So,
I like the
all right.
top 10.
Well, no, we're not doing the top 10 apparently.
I love the top
No,
10.
you know how Kevin is? He likes to have his own soapbox. You remind me of Mr. Fasano. I'm just saying, like, he's the same way.
In a good
right?
way.
Yeah. All right. This is Tampa Home Talk. We'll be back in a minute. Stick around.
Welcome home, Tampa Home Talk. We're
Nailed
back.
it.
Nailed it. We're back, and I was going to reach down to my outline, but it's been torn in half, and in half again. And then I wanted to ask about fake titles. When people create and file with the county, because you've got this gap and you don't really have good oversight, so what happens in situations where people just file a title thing with the county that shouldn't be filed?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I actually, my book isn't out yet, but I've written a book, waiting to finish it because there's a.
Wait, is that the Fraudshine State book? I thought you did publish it, no?
I haven't published it yet because there's kind of the main story is a gentleman that we caught trying to sell 16 stolen properties through our title company, in my other title company in Madera Beach, Synergy Title. And my closer there, Leslie, is extremely astute, and she caught something, eyebrow raiser, started looking into everything else, and this guy's a licensed real estate broker. And he has been
not for long.
He has been stealing and selling. I just broke your pen.
Of course you did.
Properties forever, and the detective, who I haven't interviewed yet, he's finished his case after a year and a half, and he's turned it over to the prosecutor. So this guy is going to go away. But
is that what you're waiting on for that to finish, and then what? You're going to interview him in jail? Is that how it's going to go down?
No, I'm going to interview the detective and hopefully the prosecutor. And but more importantly, I'll be able once the investigation is turned over to the state, it becomes public record. So then instead of saying a guy in Pinellas, I can say his name. So I'd like to put that in the book because this guy needs to go down. But yes, it's very common. We see it a lot, and we don't see it even more often because it is remarkably easy to steal title to someone's property.
I don't know if we should be advertising it on the air, Kevin.
It's a warning, and you need to check your.
It is a warning,
you need to go to the property appraiser site on a regular basis and just check because it's all
you
there.
guys have another whole company that monitors that,
yeah,
right?
So the book, The Fraudshine State, is an expose of this type of crime, and it's one that people just don't believe in. It's happening hundreds and hundreds of times every week in Florida, but there are millions of homes in Florida, so it doesn't happen to you very often. But it. There's a gentleman that's in the book, that's featured in the book. His name's Matthew Cox, and he just got out of prison last year after doing about 12 years of a 20-some-year sentence, and he stole 109 properties just in Ybor City.
It was almost yours, Leo.
He was almost single-handedly responsible for the values, the average value in that area going from 80-something thousand to almost 300, because he would. I don't want to get into the details because what he did was brilliant and pretty simple, but basically buy a house for extremely more than it's worth, probably not him buying it, probably a fake ID of like a literally non-existent person with a social number and everything, and that's easy to do. And then take that $80,000 property, show it as a $300,000 sale simply by paying really high doc stamps. And then he's got a $300,000 property, and he would leverage that with 6-8 different lenders at the same time. Because of that gap, 6 lenders with 6 title companies, nobody's going to see another mortgage in the way. And he's had up to $1.8 million loaned against an $80,000 property.
Usually they catch it, though, if they see the other inquiries. That's why they inquire about it. Are you saying he did it in different names? Mm-hmm. Oh, so that was totally under the radar.
He used Reservoir Dogs. He had a Mr. White, a Mr. Green, a Mr. Blue, Mr. Black. He didn't do pink or blonde, but he also used C. Montgomery Burns as the person who
in charge of the money.
Yeah. So the scam is typically it's a various. There's a lot of scams, but the most easily understood one is public record. I mean, that's the problem with it, is it's public. And with technology today, anyone, especially for records in Florida, anyone in the world with internet access can see all of the documents, unlimited, anonymously, and for free, signatures, everything. And what they do is create a fake deed with that person's signature. You can employ a notary, you can have an accomplice, or you can just order a fake notary stamp from Amazon for $15. In fact, I've got one that I use as an example. I don't use it as...
It's so easy to become a notary.
Hopefully you're not notarizing people's stuff with that, Kevin.
Well, I'm not. That guy is. But not true. So then the deed puts the bad guy in title, or whoever he wants, an entity that he controls or something like that. And then if there's a mortgage, that is remarkably easy to satisfy a record, because let's say there's a mortgage with Bank of America against whatever property has been targeted. Well, find another Bank of America satisfaction of mortgage in that county, which there will be thousands.
R&D.
Plagiarize it. And when the satisfaction is recorded, the county doesn't tell the lender, hey, you recorded a satisfaction, because they did it. They don't tell the seller, hey, you recorded a deed, because they did it, as far as they know. One thing that a lot of folks don't know, and if you went to the county courthouse and saw how these operations work, you'd understand why, but they have absolutely zero liability or responsibility to make sure that anything's right.
Well, they're just a clerk, taking a document, putting a stamp. That's all they're doing.
Taking hundreds and hundreds of documents. They look at it and make sure that the format is right and that the money was paid. They certainly can't see if this person's signature matches the same one from before. They don't do title searches.
What about stuff that gets recorded in the wrong county? Have you seen that often?
Wait, I got a different...
Okay.
Sorry, I'm really curious. Someone actually compares signatures?
No. So at title companies, we do.
Title companies, actually, I never knew that.
Yeah. I don't know that all do, but we do.
And I was going to say some title companies.
Because my signature over the years, because I went from signing maybe 2 or 3 sheets of paper a day, so now I sign 50 to 60 sheets of paper a day. My signature has gotten...
It changes, yep.
Yeah, over time. Yeah. So how do you account for that?
I know my signature is different because I was a lender, and we were a lender that would actually, do the transfer regularly because we would fund in our name. So over time, the more you sign, the worse it gets.
Mine looks like it looks more like an X than anything. Like I'm illiterate, but well, so does that.
My 3 rows looks better than mine for sure.
There you go.
But so I've seen fraud examples where it's pretty obvious, and I've had people. This is kind of back in the pre-crash days when mortgage brokers were just running roughshod and doing everything, controlling appraisals and things like that. And I've heard, well, he had a stroke. Your signature changes, right?
That would make sense.
I said, okay, well, he's 27 years old, but he could have had a stroke, I guess. Or he broke his hand, so he had to sign left-handed.
Yeah, that could be true, too.
That's a good one. It could totally be true. I don't know if it could be true for the same loan officer 4 or 5 times, because the same guy told me that.
Yeah.
Unless that's how he gets people to sign. Smash their hands with a hammer, hit their non-signing hand. Come on.
Yeah, their right hand's broken. Sorry, they got to sign with the left.
But so then what can happen? It can go a lot of directions. If the property is vacant, they can sell it. What will typically happen is that the recorder of deeds, which is called the county clerk here, they will record the document, and then the appraiser's office and then the tax office will kind of catch up with those records. It gets submitted to them. So the bad guy or girl it's
always the dude. It's not the girl.
Oh, no,
just kidding.
Not today. The bad person. They're going to wait a little bit, and then they're going to do their thing. They're either going to go and get a line of credit that doesn't require an appraisal, low enough loan to value, because the people might still live there. So you could be living in your house. This could happen to you. You have no idea. You're still making your payments. Your lender's still getting their payments. So there's no red flag whatsoever.
They've satisfied your mortgage. They've recorded a new deed. They've taken a new mortgage.
Yes. And what can happen is usually the way that the legitimate homeowner finds out is when a process server shows up to serve foreclosure papers to the bad guy who doesn't live there and who you've never heard of.
What a way to find out that you're tangled up in that mess that most people don't know anything about.
Is the homeowner protected at all, or
no? Not really.
The high-pitched voice of concern.
Really, the FBI is investigating that, but how high is that on their priority list?
Well, it's high, but it's crowded up there where it's high. So like wire fraud is the big thing now with between different title companies and just the the folks overseas who create all of our technology for us because they're so cheap, which is a trick, they then hack, and they're reading people's emails, and they're getting in. They started, it used to be fake checks. We all figured that out after getting burned a few times. No more checks. Now it's just wires.
Actually, the fake checks are probably better than the wires at this point.
Yeah, we've actually, we ask our buyers to bring certified checks to closings because a buyer's typically not going to bring fake money. But a real quick story about this gap. When I was in St. Louis, I went, I had a I just opened my office there a few months earlier, had a very early closing, and I went in to do it myself. It was like 7 a.m., and it was this very nice older gentleman selling a $60,000 house with no mortgage on it, and he had a realtor and paid some fees, and he walked with about 50-ish, and we gave him his check. This was 2005, so we were giving checks. Gave him his check, and then we used couriers then, so we sent a courier with that deed to, this was a cash transaction, with the deed to sell from that guy to our buyer. And then that guy sold that same property at 10 more title companies that same day. So he sold it 11 times.
That's like a title company's nightmare right there.
Yeah, everyone but us. We happened to do it early and send a courier, so ours got recorded first. Our buyer owned the home. Whew. Every other buyer was just out the money and had to go after who?
A ghost with a fake ID, I guess.
Yeah. He did end up getting in trouble and going to jail, but I doubt people got all their money back.
You know, I don't know. And you think about this, like with this, I'm following everything you're saying, but a lot of people probably don't, right? Because they don't know how title works. So think about the person at the FBI. They probably would have to have some type of background and really understand title and how it works.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of FBI guys, and they're really smart. So they typically know what's going on.
They can follow it.
Yeah.
All right, this is Tampa Home Talk. Stick around when we come back. Mr. George Root with Stockholm Law Group. Back in a moment.
Welcome home.
Yes.
Welcome home, Tampa Home Talk.
That's right.
Yeah. Is that too many homes?
No.
Because I know someone that could...
We can't change the name of the show. It's been Tampa Home Talk for 8 years.
You can easily change the name of the show. We have a title agent here.
No, we're not doing that. Nope.
I don't want to feel responsible for that. She'd make me buy the new sign and everything.
That's right.
No, we're not going to change the colors.
Oh,
we're sticking with the purple.
I like the purple.
Well, I thought you liked green. I couldn't tell.
I like green. Green and purple go together.
No, they don't. I'm glad your wife is dressing you.
Wait. Green and purple go together.
No.
Well, I'm a little colorblind, so yes.
Hey, wait, Katrina, now that you are at least talking about changing things, I noticed that you're an official Keller Williams office or something?
Yes, our office right here at the Tampa Home Talk Studios is actually an official Keller Williams office. Did you notice the sign when you pulled up?
You've been an official Keller Williams office.
No, not sort of, not really, not. It's official. It's like signage official. And KWRI official, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what any of that means.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just a franchise, it's just technicalities, but
Does it affect my title?
No, not really.
Okay.
Not really. All right, Mr. George, let's talk about what type of law you practice. You are with Stockholm Law Group, and all attorneys are not the same, and we definitely agree in that specialty area of law, and we got some great stuff to talk about with you this morning, so tell us about yourself. What do you do?
Yes, ma'am. I represent condos and HOAs as general counsel. I've been practicing in the area over 10 years. My firm, the Stockholm Law Group, most of the attorneys there do a lot of first-party property law. Basically, if you have insurance claims and insurance company doesn't pay out what it should or denies claim, that's where the rest of the folks in my office get involved.
So you guys represent the HOAs and the pretty much like HOAs, property managers, that kind of stuff, or do you ever represent homeowners?
It is... I've been practicing in the condominium HOA general counsel representation for a while, and Stockholm Law Group brought me in to build out their practice. We felt like there would be some opportunities there for cross referrals and beneficial to our clients. So I represent associations. It's illegal for me to represent managers and associations and give them advice as well. So I try to steer clear of that.
Yeah. Well, we may actually get a question pertaining to that, so maybe you can answer it, and then even if you refer them out, but I think it's a pretty good one. So general counsel includes, so what kind of stuff you do, like deed restriction violations, enforcement of the rules, delinquent assessment collection?
All that. I think of myself as a risk manager, too. I'm not one of those that's going to drive unnecessary litigation just to make billable hours. I mean, I think part of our our service that we offer clients is help them avoid some of the risk, help them take actions and have policies and procedures that avoid those type of situations where they're getting sued, and try to get them to enforce their policies consistently, because the number one defense we see in a lot of condo HOA litigation is the two highest are waiver and selective enforcement. That basically means that you've quit enforcing your restrictions, or you're not treating everybody equally, and that's how you can get caught up and get in trouble. So we try to keep them, advise them to avoid those type of situations.
Yeah, I'm curious if any of our people have experienced that, and we'll talk about more of the stuff that you do as well, because there's a lot that goes into that. But our call-in numbers are 888-404-1010, 888-404-1010. What's the biggest thing you guys see other than like delinquent HOA? Like, what's next on the list? Is it that where they're not treating everyone the same?
There's been a few hot button issues the last few years. Emotional support animals have been a big issue.
Oh, yes. Talk about that. Tell me about that. Because we get that a lot, too. And as realtors, we're like, yeah, we're not touching that.
It's a tricky area. If you get involved in one of those situations, you're evaluating a potential emotional support animal claim. You want to talk about it with general counsel. I had some colleagues that were involved with an emotional support squirrel case over in Pinellas County, and if I had been involved in a situation like that, I would have felt pretty comfortable litigating that situation, because it's arguably a problem with the health, safety, and welfare.
And because who doesn't hate squirrels? They climb all over you and I mean.
But this guy ultimately got to keep his emotional support squirrel. There's a wide range between.
That's nuts.
Well, I mean, when you think about how extreme.
I like that. That's a good fun. That's
but think about how extreme it can be, right? Like, if you can have an emotional support squirrel, what's stopping someone from having an emotional support horse in a condo, right? Like, technically speaking.
I have a friend that she takes her some kind of yapper dog on flights with her, and she says that it's her emotional support dog, and it's not. She just wants to take it.
You got to be careful.
And how do you prove that?
But I think there's a lot of that going on, but the problem is it's protected with HUD, and so that's a big area of litigation where HOAs can be sued. And part of your job, in representing HOAs, is to make sure that you don't get sued, right? And that they're following the rules, and you don't have these rogue board members doing stuff they shouldn't be doing.
Absolutely.
Right?
About a year ago, HUD revised their guidelines, and the Florida legislature was making some changes to their statutes regarding the same. And so mid-session, they had to go in and change everything around to kind of track what's in the HUD guidelines. And some of the changes, some of the highlights are, if this unit owner has a disability-related need for the emotional support animal, and they can support that with documentation, then they're probably going to be able to keep that, and you're going to get yourself into trouble.
How did the squirrel guy do that?
So,
I think sometimes people are afraid to litigate these cases because of the risk, and the insurance company's motivated to settle the claim at a lower amount. So sometimes they'll pay these things out without litigating.
And when you start talking about protected classes, I mean, that's a you don't want to be the other side of that suit. Is all I'm saying.
You don't want to be the squirrel or the dog or the ostrich.
Well, So what constitutes harassment by the HOA?
That's a personal injury type lawyer question. I basically, when they have a situation.
Well, give me an example of something where you had to counsel your HOAs, like, hey, that you should not be doing this.
Well, the way to avoid that is to adopt policies and procedures. Like, one of the big things we do as general counsel for HOAs is to violation enforcement. So you're not allowed to have metal roofs in your neighborhood, and somebody throws a metal roof on without going through the ARC committee or the ACC committee. We get involved in that. So, like, I help the clients tailor policies. So they observe violations on an inspection. They send out the letters. At some point, the attorney gets involved in pre-suit mediation and all that stuff. So consistent policies and procedures, treat everybody the same.
Right.
Everybody gets a letter. It doesn't mean that you can't occasionally make concessions or steer outside the policy, but you need to be as consistent as possible.
Pat, did you say we have a call-in or a question? I think so. Are you there?
He's doing traffic and weather in a different booth.
Maybe. Are you there? Do we have a caller?
I think the emotional support squirrel.
Oh, no, she's here. She's here.
She does,
I heard a voice.
What's your question? So tell me, what's your question?
Is this my cue?
Yes.
I live in a deed-restricted HOA community in Spring Hill, and have always thought that putting a privacy fence up ensures that what's in my backyard is private, as what's in my house is private, but recently found out that our HOA is flying into people's backyard.
Did you say, I think you cut out, but you said they're flying a drone into people's backyard?
They're flying drones around the neighborhood and looking into people's backyards, and if there's something there not approved by the HOA, they're forcing residents to take it down.
Well, they need a license to fly the drone. That could be a police and an FAA thing.
Right.
For sure. For sure. Have you had any of your HOAs do that?
I've had HOAs come to us and ask us to amend their governing documents to add provisions regarding restrictions with the use of drones in the neighborhood. And I'm not an expert in that area. I'm not going to dabble in an area I'm not familiar with. But absolutely, FAA and there's probably local ordinances. I know a lot of the states are adding a lot of provisions about them, and that's a new cutting edge area of condo HOA law.
Are they allowed to do that though? Are the HOAs allowed to fly drones into people's private space? Like their backyard should be their private.
Until someone stops them.
At a certain level, I think you have some property rights to the airspace above your land. I don't know how high that goes. I haven't seen that litigated yet. I've seen the issue come up more often where they're wanting to amend the governing documents to restrict people's usage, unit owners' usage of the drones within the community.
I have a question about the drone. So if you get a fine and they used a drone photograph to do it, they would be in violation of FAA Part 107, because that's what dictates that if you're flying a drone commercially, which that's not residential.
Did you get a letter or anything with a drone photo?
Yeah, that
could
be used with an attorney to get the association cited properly.
Cited or sued.
That's the proof.
I have very few property management companies that I work with that
would be that bold to do that.
Do the drone. It hasn't come up for me yet. The only way it's come up so far is tailoring the restrictions to keep people from using it in the neighborhood. I haven't seen the HOAs use it yet.
Did you get a letter with a photo from a drone photo? Are you there? We may have lost her.
I would love to see that lawsuit play out, using the drone photo itself as evidence of illegal activity of the drone use.
Yeah, I can imagine that that's allowed. Like,
if you have a commercial license, you can take the photos.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's allowed for the purpose of the HOA looking into people's backyard.
If they're viewing the property from a public space,
from a common area,
it's probably similar to like the police looking over the curtilage over the fence and what they can see from a public area. I don't think that's a violation of any law that I'm aware of. But if they're violating an HOA restriction or they're violating local ordinance on drones, then that's the way to.
How high of airspace do you own? Do you know?
You're looking at me. That's an attorney question. Look at the
I
attorney.
know it's an attorney question, but you have so much useless trivia
knowledge. There's a right-of-way and there's utility easements. So if you're flying your drone in this is me as how would I handle it as an engineer? If I'm in a utility easement, I'm allowed to be there.
If arguably
maybe not. It's still someone's property.
Right, but people have security cameras on their house that are catching the road, and if they're allowed to have that security camera on the edge of the house, how is that any different than a drone flying from an area that has permission to be?
She's still with us. Did you get a letter from the HOA with an aerial photo of a violation?
No, I did not.
Sorry, the phone keeps cutting out. We're not catching what you're saying.
I was talking with another resident, and she was just saying that this is a practice of the HOA. That we put privacy fences to be private, and flying over, invading our privacy.
I think the minute they get an aerial photo with a violation letter,
that's when the attorney's
that comes in there. Yeah, I can tell you, if my HOA was flying a drone in my backyard, I don't know how long that drone would be in the air, but I'm just saying, right, Kevin? Like that's what you alluded to as well. Because your space is your space is your space.
Sometimes their space is my space.
You would just need to have someone yell "pull" because you're holding the shotgun. Then that drone is free game.
Yeah, as soon as they were over my backyard airspace, I wish I could answer that right off the cuff, but I can't.
I thought it was aliens. What do you want me to do? turns out it's not. Sorry.
It's a small drone.
Sorry about your $2,000 piece of equipment there.
That's a great question, though, and
That's an expensive
we're going to
drone.
have to
Get 'em
dig
really
into
cheap
that a
now.
little bit more, right? Like the aerial rates and
Putting up a privacy fence.
yeah. Well, I agree, and that
Putting up a privacy fence is for privacy.
we'll be back in a moment. Stick around.
I'm Katrina.
Welcome home. This is Tampa Home Talk, and we're glad you're here. Thanks so much. And welcome back. We have Mr. George Root with Stockholm Law Group and Kevin Overstreet still joining us for the second half of the hour. So what are some of the issues that you are seeing with the HOAs? Like what are some of the biggies this year? And has anything changed after COVID?
A lot of it is what emergency powers do they have in both the condo and HOA statute. The emergency power provisions, we're contemplating earthquakes, well, not earthquakes, hurricanes in Florida, natural disasters, not pandemics. They're working on some bills in session now to expand emergency powers to things like pandemics and kind of make it more clear what you're allowed to do remotely versus in-person meetings and that kind of thing.
I do have a question for something that I saw for someone else, and it's a condo over near the beach, and basically it's like a second home type property for this person, and basically the HOA, the homeowner got a little bit behind, which of course they referred it to an attorney tacked on some fees, but some of the expenses I saw that they added in there was some type of an extra tenant, whatever, but the property is not tenant occupied. Can they do that automatically and charge those extra fees, or do you know?
I'm not familiar. Were you talking about they weren't paying their assessments and attorney was pursuing
Assessments got a little bit behind, so the attorney sent the letter, but then they tack on extra fees. There was an extra line item in there, something related to the tenant. I'll see if I can find it, but
They
it
may
was
have,
not tenant occupied.
They may have had to list several people, unknown tenants and unknown heirs of tenants and things like that. So there may have been more people that were served or more effort put into
Obviously,
it.
if you've gotten to the lawsuit stage, there's a really neat mechanism in the
I
statute.
don't think it was a lawsuit. I think it was just a notice.
Well, one of the things I do is a tenant demand letter. So the statute allows you, any delinquent unit owner, condo, HOA, the two different statutes have similar provisions. If a unit owner is not current on their assessments, you can send a tenant demand letter to the tenant living there if there's a tenant.
But there's not a tenant, and they charged a
Okay.
fee. That was the question.
But that's weird.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
They shouldn't be charging any fees that are authorized by the statute and the governing documents. Some governing documents allow late fees. Florida statute caps the late fee and interest amount. And sometimes you can charge some administrative fees if it's in the property management contract with the HOA or in the governing documents. But the tenant fee for a missing tenant seems pretty ludicrous.
If I
Yeah, I
could,
thought it was too.
interject something here real quick, with title insurance. So everything that's in the CCRs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions of the HOA, that is always listed collectively as an exception to the title policy. So what that means is the title policy for the new buyer insures against loss or claim from kind of everything except these exceptions. And the CCRs are always exceptions because we basically could never take the time to read and interpret all of those. So we basically say everything that's in there is
An exception to title.
Yeah, you won't have a title claim if you violate something or think you don't violate something that they think you do. That is between you and them. So it's totally excluded from any kind of coverage, and that's something that people need to be aware of. And I don't know how many buyers sit down and read their covenants, conditions,
Yeah.
and restrictions, but they really should.
Well, I'll tell you, there's another, like, for example, I've got a client that's moving here, and they're building probably $1 million home. And this little area, you guys are probably familiar with it, right there, like the Odessa, Tarpon Springs area.
Absolutely.
A lot of estate-type homes there. So this little pocket was developed with an HOA, but it's one of those things where, like, it was developed before the crash, and then nobody really, So the part of the thing is my client read all the CCRs, and they said basically, well, it says you can't have a screen over your pool, right? Like everybody screens their pool.
Gotta keep the mosquitoes out.
Well, yeah, when I called the HOA president, she was like, oh, well, I have my pool screened, and so-and-so has their pool screened. Well, they're the only two houses in this little tiny community. So it's definitely one of the things where the CCRs need to be updated. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's something condominium HOAs come to us for all the time to amend the governing documents, whether it's to keep drones from flying around the neighborhood or to allow screens finally. Arguably, if everybody in the neighborhood has a screened enclosure and they haven't enforced it, that's the waiver argument I was talking about earlier. So if you've got a no shed provision in your governing documents and 50% of the community has sheds, you've probably waived the right to enforce that. Sometimes there's ways for HOAs and condos to rehab their ability to enforce restrictions if the violations aren't as pervasive as like 50% or whatever.
And those waivers have to be there because sometimes you'll update a CCR and you'll never get the vote because you might need 80%. I've seen some that you need 100% of the vote. You'll never get that on the vote, so you just have to have a means to move forward.
Well, I'll give you, like the neighborhood that I'm in, our covenants were written back probably in the 70s. So it's a very mixed neighborhood, meaning you might have some houses built in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
And today's.
There's stuff recently built, and I think there's still 5 or 6 lots left in there that someone could build on. So you've got a pretty wide range, not only of styles and that sort of stuff, but they're also pretty loosely written, comparatively speaking, by today's standards because they were written in the 70s. So what we see constantly is the HOA trying to enforce things that they can't, right? Like I know my next door neighbor had a like a big driving RV, and the bylaws were written so long ago that basically it doesn't really address stuff like that. Anyway, they end up taking the HOA to court and they won because what the judge said is pretty much you can't have your cake and eat it too. They basically can have it behind the fence was what they said.
That sounds like those need to be rewritten.
So that's the challenge they've been running into. There's 1,100 homes in there, and the people in there do not want to sign up on that because they didn't sign up for that, right? A lot of people bought in there, I think including myself, really, to be quite
several
transparent.
Different types of violations that are happening now just haven't been enforced, so they don't want to get into tightening it down.
A lot of
they can't get the community sign off to get it passed.
Yeah.
You were talking about the high threshold for approving amendments. Some communities 2/3, 80%. There's a little bit of a workaround around that. A lot of association governing documents allow them to promulgate rules and regulations, and they'll adopt architectural guidelines, and those can be effective. Especially if they're enforcing them consistently. But if they've gone 20 years and they haven't followed the same consistent pattern, they're going to have a hard time enforcing that in a court of law.
Yeah, I know the CAM manager, I was friends with her, I talked to her, and she said, technically, even though it's in our bylaws to get HOA approval to have your house painted, if they decided they wanted to paint it bright purple, they couldn't technically tell them no. So that's the unadvantage, right, of having it, but the flip side, you have people like me that we do have like a boat and a camper, which we don't store at our place.
A purple shed and a green pergola.
No, we don't. But
you can't tie your Rottweiler to your car.
Kevin,
unless you grow the grass high enough that nobody can see it.
Oh, that's a nice. That's a nice guard dog right there.
Not a great neighborhood, but still.
Oh my gosh, okay. So real quick, George, we're already out of time. I don't know how that happened so quick. What advice do you have for listeners with issues on the HOA? About 30 seconds.
Submit architectural approval applications. I know you may disagree with me, but I think get permission to do it. That way, if they change their mind later, you've got something in writing showing that.
Yeah, so even after a violation, good one. I love it. All right, this is Tampa Home Talk. It's been a fun 2 hours. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Love where you live, or we're going to fix it. Welcome home.
Love where you live.